Hello, my name's Bill. I work for Dominion Technologies. I'm here today to show you how to disassemble, rebuild, and then reassemble a valve brake adapter. You have some visual aid tools here to help with the adapter. Gives you an oversight of some of the tools in the toolkit. And it also has a few, I believe, blow-up pictures in it that are usually helpful as a visual aid. This manual here gives you an oversight of some of the general maintenance and repair techniques for rebuilding a brake adapter. You also have a brake adapter toolkit. You actually don't want to rebuild without one of these. It's got pretty much all the seals and stuff that you're going to need to rebuild a valve brake adapter. It has extra screws, some extra details. They usually get beat up and worn out, extra jaws. Got some lubricant in there. And it's even got a little pick set here to help you pull some of the seals off and put them on. I wouldn't suggest rebuilding without one. I also have an assembly print that I usually go by. On the assembly print, what's helpful with the assembly print is it tells you all the details, gives you a number and a detail number of them, in case you need a different detail that might be worn out or broken or damaged that you might want to order, and you can get the name of it, the detail number, and you could contact purchasing personnel at Dominion to get it replaced. There's also a list of purchased items over here on the side for some of the purchased items. Like if you have used a lot of one seal out of your kit because and it's empty, you can go off to the side here and you might be able to purchase the seal from the manufacturer who's listed off to the side and maybe get it sooner. Could help you get out of a bind. Other than that, this is just another visual aid as far as rebuilding. It shows you all the details, where they're placed, where the purchase items and seals and O-rings and glide rings and everything go. Pointed out on the print, all the numbers just match up right here. Okay, this is the brake adapter we're going to rebuild today. They're pretty much similar. Usually what's different on a brake adapter would be these jaws right here, the guide inside here, and the leveler. And the reason they make those different is because all the reservoirs on the cars are not the same. Some of them have a different level, so they'll give you a longer leveler, or they'll shorten it to the guide. The guide itself, the orifice of the hot bottle or the brake bottle that you're connecting the adapter to, is either bigger or it's smaller, or it might be at an angle. In the jaws, sometimes there's a grip that's set maybe a little bit longer or a little bit shorter, so the jaws have to be lengthened or shortened in order to grip on, so that the guide, when it's clamped, can come down and seal. But that's usually the biggest differences on valve brake adapters. They are built and designed for the reservoir that they're going to be used on. So today, I'm going to show you how to take this one apart and change all the seals, visually inspect to see if anything else is worn out, and reassemble it so that you can put it back online. First I do is, the majority of your adapters come with these two holes right here in the sleeve, and it's kind of a safety thing, keeps it from springing back up there because there's a heavy spring inside the brake adapter. Now, I use an Allen wrench here to go through here and take out three screws. There are three, it shows on the print up here that I'm going by, there are three M4 by 25 inches long. So I'm using metric Allen wrenches. Now, I'll unscrew these. Now, usually when I do this, I take two of them out completely. And I will dump them on the ground. And I'm going to get a small rag here, wipe up as I go along. And then I'll take this last one right here. And as I'm undoing this slowly, you can see the sleeve is starting to lift up off of the jaws. The Allen wrench is now tight up against the cylinder inside, holding it from springing up. So I can set the M4 by 25 down on the ground. Now I can wiggle with my hand and pull the manifold off the top. And I'll set that off to the side for right now. It reveals the top of the piston with the seals on top of the piston inside. Now, if I take my hand and push down, I can pull this out and you can see the spring that's holding it down. Now, if I push this back in here, you can see that it'll hold it so it doesn't spring up on you. Now, as I'm disassembling, this is the sleeve with a press fit ring insert at the end. This is what the jaws ride on. It's like a stainless steel, so it doesn't wear out as fast as aluminum would. Okay, so I'm going to set this sleeve off to the side along with the spring. And now I'm going to take the jaws off. They just kind of flip off of the O-ring. As you can see, the little hook right here by my finger just hooks on and slides off. So I'll pile these right here off to the side. Now, there's several ways you can do this. You can inspect as you're going along and set off to the side anything that's got defects. Or you can just leave them set off to the side and inspect them as you're putting O-rings and the seals on. Now I take my fingers and hold the piston in my hand and I just push. And it slides right out. And I can set the cylinder off to the side. Now I have the piston assembly right here in my hand. Wipe a little bit of the fluid off here so it's not as slippery. And now I'm going to take the guide off. The guide is held on by 3 screws. And I'll loosen them up. Now, some guides have seals on the screws up here at the top, and some guides don't. As I'm disassembling this, I noticed that the screws do have seals on them. And that's to help ensure a vacuum-tight seal. The guide is the part that seals on the reservoir. So the screw holes are inside of the reservoir. So they put a seal on the screw to help with the vacuum, so none of the vacuum leaks. Now I'll set the guide off to the side, and I'll set the screws for the guide off to the side here, and you can see the little O-ring and the small washer. And I can take my pick, I can take these seals right here that are setting on the valve seats, and I will just pile all these bad seals on a rag to be discarded later. I set them off to the side for right now because sometimes the seals aren't bad, and if you're out of a seal when you do a rebuild, you might need to grab one from here and put it on there just to get you out of the hole so you don't shut down a line or something, okay? Now I take my Allen wrench, and I've got 3 screws that hold the valve cell and the piston together. As you can see, they're tight, but they're not too tight, where they feel like they're stripping out or anything. Now you have springs inside of here holding some of this. So I try to hold it down as I'm unscrewing it. Because the springs in here can push yeah, there you go. Now that should just lift right up there. Okay. Yeah. there's a flat on here. Sometimes they just kind of want to stick because of the lubricants and everything else in here. There. And that should reveal it like this, or you would still have pieces like this, you know, and however it'll come apart, and you can work with it and fix anything that's pretty much damaged on it or replace it. Okay, so now I'm going to take the valve glands out, and you can see there's different size springs. The larger spring is for your vacuum circuit. The smaller spring in height is for your fill circuit. It's almost the same diameter. It's actually the same diameter as the vacuum spring. Then you got your scavenge spring, which is a smaller diameter, but it's the same size and height almost as the vacuum spring. A lot of people get those mixed up. Now, you can take your Allen wrench and kind of tap the valve seats out through the valve spools. As you can see, they have seals on them. And you can push your valve spool with your finger and pull them out on the ends, separating them from the valve cell. Now, once you've got that all done, you're pretty much complete with disassembling the details that build up your interior of your valve brake adapter. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on taking the seals off of the details, setting them over in the pile, and then showing you how to find the seal that goes back on there using the prints. I usually start with, it doesn't matter, you can start with anything really, but I'm going to start with the valve spools. I'm going to take the seals off using my pick, gently dig in there without digging into the actual valve spool metal. As you can see, the pick is a metal pick. I just push it down, twist it, and I can turn the valve spool and pull the seal off. Then, in the valve gland, there's a seal right here, as you can see. And I'll put my pick inside there gently, and now you can see that the seal is out on the inside. Now I can easily take my pick in there and grab it and pull it out. And that's how I'll do the other glands. Be careful though, you don't want to shove the pick through and stick yourself in the hand. Now, I'm going to take the seal off of the valve seat. I put it down on the ground, and I take and I twist. The half round side, and then I can see it and I pull it up. I mean, everybody's got their own way to do it. Oh, kind of turned. But if you can see, I'm pulling it. Now I'm going to do the rest of them. So all of these have the seals taken out. Everything's setting up here in the front. I'm going to take the seal off of the guide. Now this is the seal that gets changed sometimes per shift, sometimes, you know, per day, sometimes per couple of days, per week. So the guide gets a lot of abuse as far as taking the seals off. If you take your pick and slide it in backwards and just twist the pick, you won't dig in to the aluminum guide. And that causes gouges if you dig in. So that would save your guide a lot more, being as the O-ring that's being changed the most gets pulled out without nicking the guide up really bad. Now I'm going to do the piston. I'll start with the top side. I just gently push the pick in between the aluminum, as you can see, and I can pull out the O-rings and just slide them right on the pick and stick them in the pile. Now I've got 3 O-rings on the other end. I will pull them out. They're just setting on the bottom. They're a seal for the gland when it sets in there. Now I have this O-ring on the side of the piston. I can just pull that one off. Once that's done, I set that one off to the side. Now I've got the valve cell. Get a couple of small rings right here for the porting. And that comes off. Now, right here is an O-ring in this little groove here where the piston slides through. So it's this part of the piston slides through here on this opposite side. So they have seals in there to help seal and prevent leaking of fluid and leaking of vacuum and leaking of scabbage. So I'll take those seals out. Be careful that your hand isn't sticking out on that other side. Now, on this designed valve cell, there's 2 sets of seals. It's a double seal in there. So you got to go to the other end inside. Okay? And take the other side out too. And I will push those off to the side, and you can see where I can pull them out right here on the end once I push them through. Now that I've gotten the valve cell, I'm going to take the O-ring out of the sleeve. The sleeve has one right here off to the side. Then I will take the O-ring off of the cylinder that holds the jaws. I'll take the slide ring off of the cylinder. It has a split right there off to the side, and I just pull that off. Then I'll take the O-ring off of the back end. It has 3 pieces on it. Now that one's done. Now I'm going to disassemble some of the details on the manifold. Some manifolds are going to come with the this is a new detail here. It's a lug. It's called a lug. It's for the new holster setup assembly. Instead of buckets, we're using a hook. And I'm only going to take it off just to show you that, you know, it comes off, it comes on. It might make it easier for you to do some work on the adapter. You might have to replace it if it was dropped and nicked and bent or dragged or whatever. But just so you see how it goes on, it comes off. It's only 2 screws holding it. Some of the screws are going to come with washers. Some of them aren't. Some of them are going to be M4s. Some of them are going to be M5s. It just depends on the change, if you got it before a change or not. I'll set the lug off to the side and I'll leave the screws in it, just so I know that they go there. I'm going to take these 2 seals off of the bottom of the manifold. You got one inside and one outside. This one seals where the piston connects, and the other seals where the sleeve rides on. Okay. Now, I have a metric wrench, an M12, and I'm going to take the bleed cartridge off. Now sometimes you have to change the bleed seal. Sometimes the bleeder fitting and the bleeder screw are damaged because you use a 1/4 inch wrench to unscrew the bleeder screw, but sometimes the adapter gets really worn out on the bleeder screw because the brake adapters sometimes get bled almost daily. And this part right here wears out up at the top. The nut part wears out and it's stripped. The seal wears out because it starts getting a wear in it. And then sometimes the bleeder screw assembly loosens up. Then you try to tighten it and it strips out, and then it loosens up. You try to tighten it, it strips out. But if you ever get a leak or leaking in there because it's been loosened and unloosened and tightened and loosened and unloosened and tightened, this is how it comes apart. And you can just replace the seal. Sometimes the seals get tore kind of like this right here. And that'll be a leak. So I just take my pick and take it off of the threads, and I set my bleed screw assembly off to the side. Okay, now I'm going to get to the manifold. Some of your fittings are different. Some of your connections are different as far as scavenge. Sometimes the scavenge is just straight without a reducer, and some of them have a reducer. This one here reduces from M6 or quarter to 5/16 or an M8. And that's what this reducer is for. But you can see that if you press in on the fitting, you can pull the reducer connection out by simply pressing with a screwdriver up against the side. Now, I'm not going to disassemble this piece here, but there is a seal inside of there. Inside of there is a press fit fitting. All right, now this cartridge fitting, in order for the scavenge to work, the top part, if you put your screwdriver in and just turn, it'll come out. Okay? You can do that right here by getting a small screwdriver and lifting this up just a little bit and pulling this off to change the O-ring that is inside of the scavenge cartridge. You can see it right there. Right, that O-ring number is a 108, a 2-108 EPR, and sometimes it can be a 2-109, depending on which manifold cartridge you got. It will always tell you on top of your print box, your toolkit box right here, off to the side. It only gets replaced if it's leaking. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is the sleeve is going off and on quite a bit. When it's clamping, it moves quite a bit right here. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to look for a little wear and tear right around the edge. A little wear and tear right around the edge right here on the aluminum, and you can just basically take a file, and if you take the file lightly get the burring off. Smooth it flat. Make sure this here is all flat, and you can set it off to the side. There could be some wearing right here on the inside of the sleeve. You can take a little bit of Scotch-Brite, go around it, get it nice and smooth, a little bit of Scotch-Brite, take your file, come down here. There also could be a little bit of burring right here. You can take your Scotch-Brite again, get right there. You can even take, if you've got a Vargas tool at work, and just smooth it just a little bit, lightly. You don't want to really take off a lot. It'll last longer that way. And just file it, make sure it's flat, pop it off to the side. Sometimes the springs are sharp right here where the springs are cut in the factory. You can take a file and just go over that a little bit, get the sharp points. You can set that off to the side. You can take a Vargas tool from some of the wear and tear from the jaws, rocking back and forth in the cylinder. So you'll get a little bit up in here. On a repair, I usually hit it, make it nice, kind of like smooth on the top here. I take a Vargas tool, I can go around it a little bit, get the inside, right inside of here, just a little bit for it to last a little bit longer. You might get a little bit of wear and tear up here on the inside wall where the piston slides. So you can take a little bit of Scotch-Brite with your finger and get that. You can take your Vargas tool a little bit right here on the other end. And you just want to make sure with a file it's a little bit flat and everything's good with that one. Now, there could be some wear and tear right here on the sleeves. Some wear and tear up here on the top. Again, just a little bit of filing the burrs, get them off. Of course, you want to do this after you clean all your parts off and wipe them off. You can wipe them off with a rag. You can use a little bit of alcohol. You can use some mineral spirits, whatever, and then blow it all out. Make sure it's completely dry when you put it together, because you don't want any of the mineral spirits or the alcohol or any of the other fluids interacting with the brake seals, because they are EPR seals, and mineral-based fluids sometimes make them swell and eat the rubber and break it down, and then you know what happens when your seals are all broke down and melted and you're not getting a seal, your adapter's not going to work. Now I'll do the same thing to the valve cell. Because of the wear and tear and the gripping, I will take a Vargas tool. I'll clean up the edges where they wear and tear right here from the valve seats being pushed back and forth by the spring, by the glands being pushed back and forth, twisting, turning from the movement of the springs. And then you've got the piston wear and tear from the movement of the pistons. Well, these are actually called valve spools. This is a valve spool 2. This here is a valve spool 1, the smaller one. But you'll get wear and tear right here on the sides, because these are going in through 2 O-rings on this side and 1 O-ring on this side. And the O-rings are sealing up against these surfaces. So what I will do is I take a piece of Scotch-Brite and I will just lightly take the wear and tear down by twisting the valve spool back and forth in my finger with a piece of Scotch-Brite on the end. That smooths it back up a little bit. There again, giving it a little bit more longevity. Now, I'll also inspect the bleed screw assembly. I've noticed in particular with the bleed screw assembly that sometimes tightening back and forth right here to open and close the bleeder will cause over tightening will cause the bottom to start pushing through. The details are kind of small and thin, so you don't want to over tighten too much. Also, being made of brass, you sometimes get a little bit of burring on the nut part. So I've found that taking a file and filing the flats flat will help with the longevity of the bleeder screw assembly, which does get used quite a bit when you do a test on your valve brake adapter on the test card a couple of times, and you bleed it so that you get a better clamp. And as you can see, it's all flat. And now, just to keep them together, I'll set that inside there. Now, you can visually inspect the jaws. The jaws are made of a hardened steel, and then they're hardened again, and they're black oxided, but they still tend to rust after time because brake fluid has water in it and it gets on them and it helps rust them up. And black oxide is actually a super fast rusting process to make it black. So, you know, but the jaws are usually pretty tough. They hang in there. They don't get as much wear and tear on them as everything else, because you're actually clamping to a plastic reservoir. But every once in a while, you do get some that are kind of burred. You can do a file on the sides and on the bottom just to help. And then there's a flat right here on the top of it. And you can get that, you know, just a little bit, just to make it nice and smooth and flat again, so that it there again will help with the longevity of the part. Also, your tube connections when you're plugging in to the adapter, because they're being gripped by a piece of metal right here on the side, the tubing will get chewed. Okay? So what you want to do with your air lines, your air pilot lines, and your scavenge lines and stuff, if they're pulled in and out a lot from changing the adapters or replacing them, or, you know, rotating them or whatever, you want to clip them down about 1/4 of an inch at the ends, so you can take the worn out part off, and there gives you a little bit of longevity. Valve glands, they're usually pretty good. You just get a little bit right here and a little bit right here, sometimes right in here, just a little bit with your file. You know, after taking them apart, rebuilding them, taking them apart, rebuilding them, sometimes getting pushed in there and forced in there sometimes gives a little bit of a burr on it right there on the side. Your valve seats, you want to make sure that they're flat right here, that they don't have any debris or anything stuck inside of the valve seat holes. That's where the fluid's going to come out and go through. And this here actually is kind of like a filter of some sorts. It doesn't filter out micro, but it does filter out stuff like back in the day I used to see cigarette butts in the end of here. You know, I mean, sometimes it filters off a little bit of plastic debris that's inside of the reservoirs still, or inside of a brake tubing line or something, some metal chips and stuff. And that sometimes causes a fill, no fill pressure light to come on, or no scavenge vacuum light to come on, and that's usually when you take it apart and rebuild it, you find some junk or debris inside by these. So I just make sure they're nice and smooth up here at the top, no burrs on the round, and no burring right here on this flat. Now that pretty much covers, oh, you can actually, yeah, that pretty much covers all the parts and some of the wear and tear and whatnot that goes on with this. Now, you can wipe them with a rag at your bench. You can put some mineral spirits on the rag and wipe them out and get the majority of all the debris, and then take your air line and just blow it all out. Sometimes that's good enough to clean them up and just wipe them down, and or you can take them to a cleaning tank and actually clean them, you know, and blow them out. But you got to blow them out real good, and sometimes I run alcohol through there just to get rid of the mineral spirits more, and water and anything else that might chew up or melt an O-ring or a seal. Now that I've gone over all of that, reassemble.